Do you always struggle to remember new words in English even though you repeat them many times? I know this is quite frustrating. After all, I am a learner like you and I know how it feels. In this episode, I'm going to share with you my personal strategy to acquiring vocabulary in English, what I actually believe is the most effective way. And trust me, this information will be golden to you and I'm sure it will help you acquiring new words and most importantly, remembering them. Hey there, how's it going? Thiago here and welcome to another episode of the podcast. In case you are listening to me for the first time, I have created this podcast and YouTube channel to help intermediate and advanced learners of English communicate with more confidence, more accuracy, more clarity, and more awareness. If this sounds like something you want for yourself and your English, subscribe to the channel here on YouTube and follow the show if you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. That way you won't miss a single new episode. Before I share with you my personal strategy to learning new words, I want to share with you this very important piece of information. If you don't take away anything from this episode, at least take away this information I'm going to share with you right now. As far as I'm concerned, there are only two things that truly build vocabulary in a foreign language over time. You need exposure to that language regularly, and you need to engage in something I call activation. That's it. You need exposure and activation. Exposure and activation. Let me quickly define these 2 points here. What is exposure? Well, exposure is about being exposed to the target language you are studying. In this case, we're talking about English. So whenever you listen to a podcast in English, watch a movie in English, watch an episode of a TV show, talk to someone in English, read something, whenever you engage in an activity where there is English involved, you are gaining exposure to the language. This exposure, in my opinion, should happen daily. If you really want to have the best chances of improving your vocabulary, you should be gaining exposure to English every single day. There are many ways to do this, so reflect on how you can gain more and more exposure to the language in your daily routine. Now, the second point, activation, this is when I believe most learners fail when it comes to vocabulary building, because it's not enough for you to just consume content in English, for you to just listen to English and be exposed to it without activation. Activation is the proactive process, I call it, of reviewing the words you are trying to memorize, thinking about them on a deeper level, and actually using them. Whenever you think about a specific word more deeply, whenever you review that word, you see that over and over again. And whenever you actually use that word in sentences, in conversation, you are engaging in activation. So notice that while exposure is heavily passive, activation is heavily active. Okay? So now that I have presented these two main points to you, let me introduce you to my approach to vocabulary building. When I was learning English in the past, and even nowadays, what I do to actually learn new words and internalize them. What I do is I apply this strategy called contextual usage. Contextual usage. Contextual usage is a memorization technique grounded in the principle that we learn and retain information better when it's connected to meaningful experiences. It focuses on understanding how words are used in real-life situations, rather than just memorizing their definitions in isolation. Did you listen to this key phrase? We retain information better when this information is connected to meaningful experiences. In other words, when you are able to take that vocabulary you are trying to memorize and actively apply it in your life and make it meaningful to you, to your interests, to your life. It's not just about trying to memorize words off a list. You know, before doing this episode, I was reflecting on the type of learner I am a very pragmatic learner, meaning that I need to see how applicable something is in my life to be vaguely interested in learning it. So if you're trying to teach me something, and if I can't see how I can use that in my life directly, you lost me. I'm not going to be interested in it. I'm not going to be listening to it attentively because I haven't seen the practicality behind it. I haven't seen how I can actively use it in my life, in my work, in my routine. So I have always carried this approach to vocabulary building. So whenever I engage with a new word, I want to make it as meaningful as possible to me. I want to bring that word as close as possible to my life. And there are some ways to do this. I'm going to talk about them right now. Look, this approach of using context and focusing on real-life application can be separated or split into three main cognitive processes. The first one is something we call semantic encoding. This is about connecting new information to existing knowledge networks in the brain. So you use the knowledge you already have, you already know, to learn the new vocabulary you are trying to learn. A great way for you to do this, and it is what I've always done, is trying to find similarities between your first language and the English language when it comes to the words. Some words are similar in both languages, or the way a certain expression is used. For example, we have the word animal in English. In my native language, Brazilian Portuguese, we also have the same word, and it means the same thing, animal. In Brazilian Portuguese, by the way, we pronounce it animal. Animal. So, animal, that's Portuguese. Animal, that's English. Same word, same meaning in both languages. But what's interesting is that in English, if you want to say that someone performs an activity extremely well, like really, really well, you could call that person a beast. For example, whoa, that guitar player is a beast. Or that football player is a beast. He is a beast of a player. He is a beast of an athlete. Meaning, he is very, very good at that. What's interesting is that in my native language, we use the same word for animal to communicate that meaning. We call the person an animal as well. But you see, that's in a positive way. That guitar player is an animal. That football player is an animal playing. So doing this mental exercise of comparing how English vocabulary is used to how the vocabulary in your native language is used can be very, very useful, very helpful. This is a way of connecting the new information, which in this case is the vocabulary in English that you're trying to learn, to existing knowledge in your brain. In this case, your native language. This is super powerful. Another example could be the expression, there is no point crying over spilled milk. There's no point crying over spilled milk. This means if something bad happened, there's no point dwelling in it. It happened, let's move on. There's nothing you can do to change the past. Funny enough, we have the same expression in my native language, in Brazilian Portuguese. We have the same expression with the same words pretty much. So finding this association can be really powerful when trying to memorize new words in English. That's the first point, semantic encoding. This approach of contextual usage also has to do with elaborative rehearsal. This is about thinking about the meaning and implications of the information rather than simply repeating it. So you want to be as active, as proactive with your vocabulary building as possible. You don't want to be passive. That's not how it works. To encourage that, I want to list here a few questions that you can ask yourself when trying to learn a new word. Imagine you are listening to a podcast and then you hear the host using a nice word and then you discover how that word is spelled. Great. You have a new word in front of you that you find interesting. Here are some questions for you to ask. In what context is this word being used? Can I use this word in other contexts? Aside from this context I just heard this word in. What are the synonyms to this word? How can I communicate the same idea using different words? Is this a more formal or informal word? In what situations would it be more appropriate to use this word? And how do I want to sound when using this word? Would using this word make me sound funny, formal, serious, smart? Let me give you an example about this last point. If I want to sound more casual, laid back, I could say something like, I love happy coincidences. Now, maybe if I want to sound smart or if I want to give off an authority, I want to give off the image or the impression that I know what I'm talking about, I could say something like, I love it when things happen serendipitously. I'm communicating the same idea in these two sentences, but I'm going to use different words depending on what effect or what impact I want to communicate. You see, so by reflecting on these questions, you will be thinking about the meaning and implications of the word you are trying to learn. You see, this is about thinking about the word more deeply. It's not just about, okay, what is the definition of this word? And then trying to memorize this word off a list. You see, that's why I like this approach, because it is an approach that is very active. It's very personal. And it's all about making it meaningful to you. Because I'm sure if you can answer these questions I just listed, you will have a more intimate relationship with that new word you are trying to internalize. All right? The third cognitive process that this approach consists of is retrieval practice. Retrieval practice is about actively recalling information from memory, which strengthens the neural pathways associated with it. Pay attention to this key phrase, actively recalling. So you are active in how you review the new vocabulary, in how you think about it, in how you use it. Okay? So just to recap this first part, contextual usage, which is my favorite approach to learning new words, is all about making those words meaningful to you and thinking about those words you're trying to learn in deeper ways. So now let me give you some practical tips for memorizing English words using this strategy of contextual usage. Number 1, read extensively. Immerse yourself in English texts, books, articles, blogs that match your interests and reading level. Don't worry about reading something you're not interested in. Pick topics you are already interested in and read extensively about them. When I say extensively, I mean read articles about it, read blogs about it, read books about it, read scientific papers about it. This is reading extensively. And also according to your reading level. You want to find the sweet spot between reading something that is just too difficult for your level at the moment versus reading something that is not challenging enough. So you want to find that balance. Some books are naturally easier in terms of language than others, but you can also read graded stories that are intentionally written or targeted at English learners. All right? But be careful with the reading level. You don't want to read something that is just too hard. Otherwise, you're going to get discouraged. As you read, pay attention to how words are used in sentences and paragraphs. You can also infer meaning from context clues, surrounding words, phrases, and overall theme. I always like to give this example. I've already talked about this in previous videos I've done here on YouTube. I was once reading the book The Shining by Stephen King. It's a great thriller. And as I was reading this book in English, I noticed that there was a word being used there all the time. And the word was shriek. Shriek. I had no idea what that word meant. So at first, when I encountered it, I kind of let it go. I kept reading it anyway. But then that word started to be used so often throughout the book that at some point I had to put the book down and actually look up the meaning. And then I learned that to shriek means to give this high-pitched sound, usually when you are scared, like, ah, like that. But the interesting thing is that I never forgot that word again. I never forgot the word itself and the meaning. Partly because I saw that word being used over and over again throughout the book. That illustrates the importance of repetition when it comes to acquiring vocabulary, but also because I was doing something meaningful to me, which was reading a book from my favorite author. You see? So sometimes you learn vocabulary without even trying too hard. As long as you are doing something meaningful to you in English, and as long as you are proactive enough to pay attention to words that catch your attention or words that are repeated often in the material you are reading or consuming, you learn many new words that way. And the funny thing is that you tend to retrieve those words much more effectively because the whole experience is more meaningful to you. The next tip I would give is listen actively. Engage with English audio content like podcasts, audiobooks, videos that aligns with your interests. Again, you see, the through line here is doing things that are interesting to you, consuming things on topics that are interesting to you. You can focus on how words are pronounced and how they are used in natural conversation. If you are listening to a podcast, for example, you can try to understand the speaker's intent and the overall message when using those words. And here are a couple of nice questions you should ask yourself whenever you are consuming content in English. If you are listening to a podcast in English, think about this question. What kind of podcast am I listening to? Because the kind of podcast you're listening to will dictate the kind of vocabulary you will be exposed to. For example, I love to listen to Dr. Peter Attia's podcast. He is an American doctor, and he talks a lot about longevity and health in his podcast. When I listen to his podcast, I notice that he uses more advanced vocabulary when he explains his topics. He uses words that range between C1 and C2 levels. Also, words that you usually encounter in academic papers, in scientific papers. You see, that is one kind of English and one kind of vocabulary I'm being exposed to whenever I listen to him. On the other hand, I also love to listen to podcasts about movies, movie reviews, movie reactions. The kind of vocabulary I'm exposed to when I listen to those podcasts is completely the opposite. Usually the vocabulary tends to be more chill, more laid back, more casual. More phrasal verbs are used, more idioms are used, more colloquialisms are used. So whenever you consume content in English, podcasts, movies, TV shows, you gotta pay attention to the genre or the type of content you are consuming, because each type of content will carry with it specific words and vocabulary. Okay? So just like reading extensively is important, I would say consuming content extensively is also important. Consume all kinds of content in English. Consume content that is more formal, more academic, but also content that is more informal, more casual. This is really important. The next tip would be to write with a purpose. You can keep a journal or blog in English to practice using the new vocabulary you are trying to implement. Because, as the saying goes, if you don't use it, you lose it. You might see a word hundreds of times, but if you don't actively try to use it, you're going to forget it. Still talking about writing, write about topics that are meaningful to you. Write about things that are interesting to you. And then you can also seek feedback from teachers, friends who also speak English, and even online communities. I want to take this moment to give a shout out to one of my community members, Alessandro. Alessandro has joined my private community recently, and from the get-go, he's already sharing really cool stuff that he's doing. For example, recently, he wrote a really long post there in the community talking about a book that he has read and he found interesting about AI. But he was writing extensively about that book because it was about a topic that was really interesting to him. And as he was doing this, whether he realized it or not, he was activating his English and activating a lot of nice advanced vocabulary that he used there. So shout out to you, Alessandro, for doing that, and keep doing that. It's always nice to have people sharing cool stuff like that inside the community. By the way, you can also be part of my private community. I have just released it, and basically it's a private community where you get to interact with me, other learners about English learning, about things you're learning, about interesting topics. And by becoming a member of my community, you also gain access to some really cool perks like monthly master classes, mini courses that I'm always updating the platform with, one live Q&A session with me so that we can hang out and I can answer your questions, and many other cool bonuses and resources. So if you are interested in learning more about the community and how you can be part of my community, the link is here in the description of the video on YouTube, and also in the show notes if you are on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. The next tip is about speaking with confidence. It's important that you are actively looking for opportunities to practice speaking and conversation. Talk to people, talk to teachers, native speakers, non-native speakers, other learners. Talk to yourself. Practice vocalizing the words in English. Whatever approach you use, it's important that you practice using the new vocabulary when you write a text, but also when you speak English, when you use your voice to produce language. There is something called active vocabulary versus passive vocabulary. I'm sure you have heard of these terms, but just in case, let me just quickly define the terms here. We all have active vocabulary and passive vocabulary. Our passive vocabulary consists of the words we know, we have come across in the past, but we don't actively use in conversation when we produce language, either in conversation or in written form. But if we see those words somewhere, we recognize them and we understand them. Your active vocabulary is about the words that are more on the surface of your brain. Those are the words that you tend to use more frequently when you speak English and when you write in English. If there is one specific word that you learned and you like it, you find it interesting, and you want to make it a part of your active vocabulary, you have to activate that word as many times as possible. You have to actively use that word. If you don't use that word, it might fall into your passive vocabulary, and then you might recognize it when you see it again, or maybe you might not recognize it because you haven't been using that word in so long. All right? So that's why I said at the beginning, exposure is extremely important to the language, but activation, especially to build your active vocabulary more and more, is crucial. The next tip I have for you is create your own context. You can write sentences or short stories using the words you're trying to learn. You can make the context relevant to your life and your interests. And remember that the more personal the connection that you feel, that you create with that word, the stronger the memory of that word will be. One thing that I am a huge advocate for is imagining real scenarios that could potentially happen in your life that would allow you to use that word you're trying to learn. I used to do that all the time, guys. So Sometimes I will be watching a TV show in English, and then I would come across a nice expression that caught my attention. I would take my time to pause the episode, take notes of that phrase, look it up in the dictionary at that time. But nowadays you can use AI for this also. And then once I learned the meaning of that word, I would try to imagine real scenarios in my head that could happen in my life that would allow me to use that expression. So this is a very important step that you have to take. Yes, learn the meaning of the word, write sentences as examples, but more importantly, think to yourself, how could I use this word in my life? In what real life situations could I use this word? Oh, I could use this word maybe in my next English class. If I'm talking about this topic, I can use that word. Or if I'm going out with a friend and this happens, I can use that word or that expression. You see, this is actively picturing real scenarios, real situations that could happen in your life for you to use those words. That's why this is my favorite approach to vocabulary building, because again, it's very personal, very meaningful, very proactive, and it's deep. Finally, some additional tips here for vocabulary building include using online resources. I would say especially AI nowadays. Take advantage of ChatGPT, Google Gemini. Use these tools to build vocabulary. You can talk to these tools and you can build vocabulary with them. You can ask for example sentences. You can ask these tools whether that word is more formal or informal. You can ask the tool to give you the potential scenarios or situation you could use that word or expression. It's a real powerful tool, so use it. I would also recommend focusing on collocations. Learn words in combination with other words that they frequently appear together with. For example, make a decision. Don't just think about the word decision. Think about the whole collocation, the whole chunk here. Make a decision. Make a decision. A mistake that I hear all the time from learners is take a decision. You don't take a decision, you make a decision. So focus on that group. Make a decision. Make a decision. All right? Or heavy rain. I think right now we are having heavy rain here where I live. Finally, be patient. Building vocabulary through contextual usage takes time and consistent effort. Celebrate your small victories and keep practicing. Remember that this strategy, contextual usage, isn't just about memorizing individual words. It's about developing a deep understanding of how these words function in real-life communication. By actively engaging with English in various contexts, you'll build a rich and flexible vocabulary that will serve you well in all aspects of your life. Remember, make it meaningful to you. Go one layer deeper in a reflection of these words that you're trying to learn. And I'm sure that with time, you will build an amazing vocabulary arsenal, and you will have this arsenal at your disposal. And that's all I have for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you found it useful in your vocabulary building journey. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. This helps me a lot. I'm trying to get to 100,000 subscribers, so help me out and hit the subscribe button. If you have been watching my videos for a long time, but for some reason you're still not subscribed, come on, subscribe to the channel. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, follow the show there as well. You can also leave a 5-star review on those platforms. That also helps me a lot in those platforms. And check out my private community. Learn more about it. I would love to have you there as a member of my private community so you can take your English to the next level. Link is in the description of the video. Also, I'm going to leave it as a pinned comment here on YouTube and in the show notes on Apple and Spotify. I'm Thiago. I'm signing off. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be talking to you very soon in the upcoming video. Bye-bye.